While South Africa's Expropriation Act 2024, signed by President Cyril Ramaphosa but still not yet operational, still needs his proclamation to take effect. Replacing the 1975 Act, it empowers the state to acquire land without compensation in the public interest to address apartheid-era inequalities. The law has sparked intense debate. Supporters see it as a step towards justice, while critics argue it threatens property rights and economic stability, with provisions for nil compensation in specific cases and ongoing legal challenges. Its impact remains unclear. Joining us is Belinda Scriba, Director of Dispute Resolution at Cliffe, Dekker, Hofmeyer. Good afternoon, Belinda. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you to you and your listeners for inviting me.
President Ramaphosa is yet to set a date for the Expropriation Act's implementation. What factors do you think are influencing this delay?
Well, I think, as we all know, there's a lot of debate going on with GNU at the moment, and obviously there was a lot of negotiation going on with this act in terms of whether or not it's going to be approved or not by the other parties within the GNU and part of their negotiations with the budget. So I think it's a lot of factors that are reading into it, and the fact that there is quite a bit of uncertainty around the application of the provisions under the bill and its implementation under the Constitution.
The nil compensation clauses have stirred a lot of controversy. Can you explain what the Constitution says about this clause?
It is a very interesting question. So the Constitution does talk about there can't be arbitrary expropriation of property. And it specifically says that there should be compensation provided to those that are experiencing expropriation. And it's appropriate a compensation based on grounds of justice and equity. And last year, the government did try to pass a bill which would align the Constitution to speak to zero compensation, so allowing for zero compensation, so there wouldn't be a debate around whether or not nil compensation falls under the parameters of the Constitution. That bill didn't pass the National Assembly, so the Constitution stands where it still remains that there has to be compensation for expropriation, and appropriate compensation. So naysayers are saying that it's unconstitutional the way it currently is formatted to say nil compensation. Others are saying the specific wording around nil compensation means there's still compensation, it's just zero. It might sound like it's semantics, but it is something that is going to find its way to our Constitutional Court. I have no uncertainty, and whether or not it falls within the parameters of the Constitution as it's currently worded, we'll have to wait and see.
Belinda, how effectively does the Expropriation Act 2024 address land reform while safeguarding property rights, and is it striking the right balance?
I think what people need to bear in mind is what you said right in the beginning, is there is already an Expropriation Act out there, the 1975 Act. It is an act that was promulgated and implemented in a time that none of us really want to remember in terms of our past. So it is quite a draconian piece of legislation, and it's quite favorable to the government. It requires people that are experiencing expropriation to go through a lot of loopholes in order to try and make sure that their rights are secured and that they're getting the necessary compensation for their property. So this new bill, this new act, it's a bill, it's not a bill anymore, it's an act. We keep forgetting that. But this new act, I think, seems to try and strike a balance between having individuals jump through loopholes in order to protect their rights and having the government jump through a lot of loopholes. So this new act on the face of it is a lot more transparent and a lot more open to challenging the government in terms of its intention to expropriate. So I think it is trying to strike a good balance. There are some provisions that we'll only really understand the ramifications and the implications of them when they've gone through the courts and the courts interpreted what the provisions actually mean in terms of their generality.
I'm going to get into trouble here, but I'm sneaking in another question really quickly, so answer quickly. What steps should government take to ensure the expropriation process is transparent and fair, preventing misuse or public scepticism?
Again, I think what the public needs to realise is there's quite a draconian act that's already in place.
Yeah.
And they can use it now if the government really wants to. And from what we've experienced, this hasn't really happened. The government hasn't really used this act in order to force people off their land. So I'm not 100% sure why there's this massive concern other than the nil compensation, bearing in mind that the nil compensation is very, very narrowly interpreted as to what would qualify for just and equitable nil compensation. So I think you need to look at it very carefully and look at that provision very carefully, because it is very, very limited. And then bear in mind that there is currently quite a draconian Expropriation Act already in place. And this seeks to strike a balance between the old draconian and the new in terms of the Constitution, while trying to rectify the injustices of the past.
Belinda Scriba, thank you so much for your time. She's Director of Dispute Resolution at Cliffe, Dekker, Hofmeyer. Hope to chat to you again soon.